This is, look, and this is the day in and day out propaganda that you get from Fox. And I want to also, though, align this. We didn't do this story, but Pete Buttigieg put out a statement. Was it a statement or was it a piece that he had written? Because this is really important. It's very easy. I mean, this is what happened if you cut your teeth during the Bush administration. You could go and turn the dial down and listen to a bunch of lunatics and assholes like, on Fox News or Rush Limbaugh and AM Talk and, the gutter of the Trump administration. Although, obviously, look, compared to Trump, George W. Bush certainly, and this is just an objective fact, was way more concerned about it not being understood to be a religious war. There's no doubt about it. That is from his own public statements as well as real reporting from people like Steve Cole. I mean, you even thinking about decision-making on targeting Mullah Omar in the beginning of the war in Afghanistan, where they were actually considering not wanting to hit certain targets because of symbolic value is a real contrast and an astonishing contrast. We shouldn't be fake about it. But at the same time, I mean, you have an administration that is like, we're going to go to war against evildoers. We'll bomb anywhere we want. We have a torture regimen, and and Bush also did drop things like it's a crusade. But then if you wanted to turn the dial up for a sophisticated version of the same thing, you could listen to Tony Blair. Tony Blair was hugely supported by Democrats and by pro-war liberals at the time, which was most of them. Or you could read, oh my God, I mean, you could read some idiot like Sam Harris, who will give you George W. Bush style foreign policy, but with thought experiments and deep textual reading. And I thought of this because we have a guy who's running for president, as much of a joke as that is, who, has this enormously questionable military and consulting background, whose whole electoral argument is a joke. He's got crushed statewide running in Indiana. But because he's pro-corporate, because he's attacking Medicare for all, because he's a creature of the national security state, he's getting a lot of money from oligarchs. And the reason I diverted this is we're about to play this piece from Fox about, the difference between how Muslims in the United States looks at life. And everybody will get, most everybody watching this will get how bigoted and stupid and simplistic this is. But then we'll go to the wine track version of something that is not the same thing, but in the same universe. But first, we're going to go to Fox News, where a former Trump administration official is going to explain to a very inquisitive KT McFarland and Harris Faulkner that Muslims kill each other.
Just, KT, in terms of what our allies have expected that we have delivered on in terms of the security that you're talking about, who fills that void if we begin to pull back?
Well, there are a couple of options. I mean, the Russians would love to fill it. The Chinese, I think, want in on the game.
You mean Putin, who was hanging out in Syria while this whole thing was unfolding this week?
With his binoculars.
Yeah.
It's a really good question. I mean, I always look at the Middle East and think, in America, we think that the default position is peace. And we go to war, we have a war, somebody wins, somebody loses, we finish, we have a peace agreement, we go back to our lives. The Middle East, they've been fighting for 4,000 years. I mean, it's been an ethno-sectarian battle and psychodrama, and they've been killing each other for millennia. Their normal state of condition is war, and the peace is when they have pause, regroup, fight again.
Someone's listening to Waking Up with Sam Harris.
Man. Yeah, that does sound very. That's better. It's at least more engaging presentation. But this is what happens, and this is why I did, and this is why it wasn't good enough to say like, oh yeah, but it's so great that so and so's an atheist. This stuff has serious consequences when you completely dehistoricize anything. That was what Sam was ranting about yesterday. He's right. Oh, well, these things just happen, and now history's in motion. You don't understand even that we could talk about if you freeze framed what's happened in Iran and Saudi Arabia since 1979 in both countries, their relationships with U.S. intervention, with various imperial interests in the region, how different politics developed, the fact that nationalist and leftist projects were undermined or failed, leftists were mass murdered across the region. I mean, you couldn't even make a statement about that to even understand the Shia-Sunni violence post-invasion of Iraq. But this sort of mindless fatalism passes for analysis, and all it does is enable, of course, the great irony, which is that obviously the United States is an incredibly violent and relentlessly ruthless empire. And you see this, in the language, right? Well, Palestinians just do it because it's just an ancient part of their code, man. Oh, Israelis bombed, a place with the city concentration of Queens with white phosphorus and blew up a bunch of kids on the beach because they really had to, because they're dealing with some type of ancient DNA on the other side. And by the way, this also will go for, I'll spend 1 second of time talking about it, but it will go for, the same people who, people who want to, oh no, everything that ever happens in the Middle East is purely the result of U.S. or Israeli interference. At this point, the primary engine in the world is U.S. presence and interference because it's the most powerful thing in the world. But all of these things are operating: economy, geography, culture, politics. But that kind of, it just is so, whether it's, on Outnumbered or on some podcast that you think you're learning something from, it's the same mindset of fatalism, which is stupid, ahistorical, and dehumanizing, but also is the engine ideologically of what gets us into these never-ending conflicts and dehumanizes a great deal of the world. Do we have the Pete Buttigieg thing? So, but anyway, well, okay, if we don't find it, then, basically there was a Pete Buttigieg thing. I know Ryan Grimm had highlighted it. We should have gotten it earlier. But, something he had written about Iran and the culture of martyrdom. Now, let's be really, really clear. Iran, first of all, like every other revolutionary state, basically cooled its jets within several years of getting to power, right? So this is Buttigieg. Buttigieg, who served in military intelligence in Afghanistan, had strong words about Trump's latest tweet. In a culture of I don't know what Trump's tweet was, but this is in a culture of martyrdom, it's unlikely that it's much of a deterrent. We've got to be smart. We've got to understand what we're up against. And we've got to think through not just the immediate, but the second and third order effects of anything the United States does. Well, okay, the second part is just the, silly bullshit business gobbledygook that doesn't mean anything. But this culture of martyrdom nonsense, look, you could not point, maybe if you want, there's analogous examples. Maybe you could say Cuba was a revolutionary state who consistently used very limited resources to try to support liberation struggles in the southern world. There's some truth to that. But the Soviet Union, China, you're talking in relatively short periods of time, governments that have as their origin and basis at least a theoretical idea of a worldwide workers' revolution. Even the theory of particularly in the Soviet Union, that the whole thing can't even work ultimately if there isn't. Within, and I'm simplifying, but within a very short period of time, relatively speaking, self-interested states that, we go from the Chinese Revolution to the early 70s. We have a deal with Nixon. We have rapprochement. We have, and Stalin, yes, he's guarding his own hemisphere. He's ruthlessly repressing people inside the Soviet Union, but he is making very pragmatic deals on a whole wide range of issues, including happily undermining communist efforts in other parts of the world. Iran has this culture of martyrdom idea. A lot of it was practically built around people being willing, basically just throwing bodies against the Iraqi army. The whole world is backing the Iraqis and trying to wage a war on us. And we are going to fight them with every single thing we have. And there's a culture there is a practical enactment, because you're sending a country's whole youth, many of them to like certain death. You have to psychologically elevate that. The idea that Iran in 2020, under the leadership of Rouhani and Javad Zarif and a supreme leader who signed off on the Iran deal and a primarily defensive regional policy, most of which part of it has been a ruthless realpolitik of guarding a transit route to Lebanon through Syria, and then also has in fact been involved for its own strategic calculations in defeating ISIS, particularly in Iraq, that is motivated by a culture of martyrdom. I mean, it's embarrassing. And it's the type of thing it gets you on the book tour. It's perfect middle-brow bullshit to sling on various middle-brow bullshit shows. It's, maybe it sounds like a smart thing to say in a college class, but hopefully you have a college professor that quickly smacks you down. But this guy, is a Rhodes Scholar. So what we have here is, and I mean, I shouldn't even put that in quotation marks. He's a Rhodes Scholar. And maybe we should more have the quotation marks in Rhodes Scholar equals intelligence. So his statement here is nothing to do with the urgency of the emergency that has been unleashed by this assassination. It's culture of martyrdom, which is designed to mystify and make yourself sound smart to a bunch of rubes. And then let's just read the second part one more time. Got to be smart. We've got to understand what we're up against. We've got to think through not just the immediate, but the second and third order effect of anything the United States does.
I also like to think about the fourth order effect.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Personally, I think Bernie does that better than Buttigieg does.
I think you're forgetting the fifth order effect, whippersnapper. Just utterly embarrassing.
I like talking to a country that has like the cross just everywhere about the culture of martyrdom. But anyway.
And what's funny though is that it would also be ridiculous. Like you could make of course you could do some type of, nuance, like how does Christianity play a role in American politics and our symbology and who we are. Of course that would be relevant. But if you actually just said, well, in order to understand the United States, you got to understand.
Check out Leviticus.
Yeah. You would be a fucking idiot. You'd be a moron. Oh, Jesus Christ.